Bruno Gröning. What sort of man was Bruno Gröning? And what is the teaching of Bruno Gröning about? To describe him in a few sentences is as impossible as to explain his work. For that reason, we wish to give an account of some impressions from Bruno Gröning's life in between our own experience reports. Danzig, now Gdansk. This is where Bruno Gröning was born. He used to answer the question of where he gained his skills and his knowledge with a story of an experience from his childhood. When he was a little boy, he ran away from home into the woods. There he wanted to complain to God about the coldness and harshness of people and asked God to take him back to heaven. He received an answer, and at the same time, his mission in life. Namely, the mission to fight against the evil and to overcome it with the good. After that, he no longer avoided people, but went to them and told them that God exists, that He is very kind, and that He wants to help.
All people, no matter what religion, nation, or skin color, are worthy of being helped.
Bruno Gröning said that God is life and nature itself, and that one can find and experience Him in everything.
Love life, God. God is everywhere.
He called plants and animals his little brothers and sisters, and often animals recovered solely through his attention to them. He understood the human body as a great gift from God, which one has to take care of lovingly for your whole life. Being a simple man, he was a stranger to all artificiality, so his self-conception was also simple.
I am but a human being who has remained natural.
He wasn't interested in other titles or roles.
Those who have had the great fortune to gain back their health through me should thank God from the bottom of their heart. I am only His tool and servant.
(1949) in Herford, Germany. Wilhelmsplatz, number 7. The healing of a 9-year-old boy was noticed by the public through the press. And ever since then, people leered around the house and wanted to talk to Bruno Gröning. Many of them, who had been given up on by doctors, saw their last chance in a meeting with the unknown faith healer. The square filled up with disabled veterans and handicapped people on crutches, in wheelchairs, on litters, and in vehicles, in some of which the people were bedded on straw. And then things occurred which later filled the newspapers' headlines. Bruno Gröning faced the sufferers, talked to them in front of many bystanders, skeptics and journalists, and people received back their eyesight and stood up from their wheelchairs. Bruno Gröning took the crutches and broke them in two over his knee. At that time, the newspaper wrote, "His word bans illness." And these words, his speeches, lectures, and wisdom, were collected and later embraced as the teaching of Bruno Gröning. Some eyewitnesses remembered their life long what he spoke from the balcony.
Give me your sickness and your sorrows. You cannot deal with all these. I will bear them for you.
And then he explained,
I draw your attention to the fact that one or the other of you may suffer some slight pain. Diese Regelungen pain, which will disappear soon if you firmly believe in the healing. There is no incurable. God is the greatest physician.
With this, he essentially said everything. Because faith connects people again with God, so that the life force runs through them again and heals. It's hard to believe that there were people who were bothered by this, who saw in Bruno Gröning some form of danger, despite all public proof of his benevolent influence. The Agency for Public Order raised doubts. All of a sudden, people started to fight against him and to misrepresent the facts in the press. The reports suddenly became very negative. Was he even allowed to heal at all? As an uneducated man, was he even able to say,
I tell you this.
Was a man like him allowed to exist next to the church and exact science? The public authorities got nervous. The officials were not interested in the fact that at that time 80,000 people seeking help had contacted Bruno Gröning in writing, people who could expect no more help from anywhere else. Obviously, there were also men who had a different mission than he did. The campaign was distinct. Bruno Gröning should disappear. One comfort remained for the people seeking help, and that was the fact that some attained healing only by their silent plea and a mental appeal for help to Bruno Gröning. His physical presence was apparently not even necessary. After the prohibition to heal and the negative reporting about him had escalated, the Review magazine came up with the idea to finance a scientific study of Bruno Gröning's healing method. Bruno Gröning was supposed to try to heal people in front of a scientific committee who were to test him. The specially chosen doctors, psychologists and physicists guaranteed Bruno Gröning that they would give him a positive evaluation if he could clearly demonstrate healings. They wanted to clear the path for him. Bruno Gröning never wanted to flaunt himself or help on command in order for skeptics to experiment with the grace of God. But in this case, he agreed, in order to get to those people who urgently needed his help. From July the 27th to August the 7th, 1949, at the University Hospital in Heidelberg, examinations of 12 selected patients showed their cases were unequivocally successful. This again confirmed that Bruno Gröning's attention led to surprising and inexplicable healings. Nevertheless, he did not get the positive evaluation he had been promised, and neither was the path cleared for him. Disappointed, he took up an invitation to go to Bavaria, to the Traberhof near Rosenheim, in order to have a few days of peace and quiet to consider his situation. The news soon spread that Bruno Gröning was in Rosenheim, and within a few days, thousands of people searching for help flocked to the Traberhof. Those who had been vegetating away in darkened rooms were taken out to the paddocks into the light of day. People slept in tents and buses and waited for Bruno Gröning, who had been called to the north of Germany once again. And then, while he was on his way back, great things began to happen. Some people talked about an intense feeling of warmth and increased pain. They spoke about a tingling in paralyzed body parts, and then the first healings. The number of people waiting rose to as many as 30,000. Bruno Gröning arrived and went out onto the balcony. First, he silently and compassionately took in the fate of his fellow human beings, and then said,
Hundreds of years ago, man left the natural path of his belief in God. Everybody thought they could manage on their own. Now we are here on this earth. Now we live as we want to, and we will know how to help ourselves, each one thought. But I tell you that nobody can be helped without God, and whoever thinks they can do without nature, which God has so beautifully created for us, should go where He wants. People believed that they could distinguish themselves from others by turning their backs on nature and climbing the stairs of culture. That was the mistake. That's where it all went wrong. That's what's missing in people. Nature. Back to nature. Back to our Lord God. Back to believing in the good in people. You should be human to human beings. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do not be spiteful. Do not be false. Do not do anything bad to anyone. You should all be good. Good to one another. You should know that you belong together, whether you are rich or poor. Never be jealous. The best and the greatest wealth is not money as you thought. Health is wealth. Health is everything, more than money. So now open up your heart and really empty it out. Empty it of all worries and troubles. You'll never be able to deal with it all. I will carry it all for you. My back is broad.
But also in Bavaria, Bruno Gröning was prohibited from healing. So he withdrew into the mountains for a while. Bruno Gröning's throat, which looks very big in some photos, was also a topic in the press back then. He explained it in this way.
I do not have goiter. It is a gland. And when I can speak to many people, this gland becomes very big, and I feel very well. When I speak to fewer people, it gets smaller, and I still feel well. When I'm only allowed to speak to very few people, it becomes very tight, and I do not feel well at all. And if they forbid me to work at all, I will burn up inside.
At that time, nobody knew that all the power which had healed thousands of people in various places passed through Bruno Gröning's body. Also what he experienced when he said,
"Give me your burden,"
is well beyond what we can imagine. After Bruno Gröning was legally prohibited from healing, local communities composed of healed people and new seekers of help were formed, which merged together into an association. They invited Bruno Gröning to come as a speaker in order to find a legal way to meet with him. So he travelled to his friends and was able to help in this way on a small scale in private events. He called his lectures community hours. At these events, he revealed to the friends the forces and physical laws among which man actually lives, and how he has to act in order to be able to successfully persist in the struggle for survival. Often, he would answer thoughts which someone was having at a particular moment. His instructions were clear. There was no shilly-shallying.
Don't think about peeling potatoes or what you're going to cook this evening. Concentrate on your body and what you perceive.
One day, Bruno Gröning met Josette Dufossé, and soon thereafter, she became his wife. Together, they moved into one half of the two-family house at 117 Dorndreher Street in Plochingen. Despite the healing ban, seekers of help continually went there to see him or called him on the telephone. Then the great trial against him was started. Violation of the healing practitioner's law and involuntary manslaughter by preventing a doctor's visit were the charges. They wanted to get rid of him once and for all. His opponents had joined forces to fight him through slander and false testimony. Thus began for Bruno Gröning the most difficult chapter of his life. Bruno Gröning in court. Much could be said about this trial, which went on for many years, but the following will suffice. Bruno Gröning regretted that he had to prepare everything himself for his lawyers because they hadn't at all understood the magnitude of the battle. It wasn't a matter of worldly laws, but rather of the elimination of a man who had called for the great turnaround in his lectures, who had made it plain to the people what was going on here on earth, and what the alternative would be if they could gain knowledge of the divine laws. Former wheeler dealers, who Bruno Gröning himself had denounced for embezzlement of donated funds, suddenly appeared as accusers. The most unreliable of them weren't even sworn in. The defense witnesses Bruno Gröning had hoped to include weren't admitted at all. Many a Bruno Gröning friend present in the courtroom for the proceedings would probably have liked to intervene as Bruno Gröning exposed himself to the humiliating word battles and twisted interpretations of the judge and prosecutor. Yet he remained calm. He surely must have thought sometimes of the one who had sent him on this path back then in the woods. This trial, and the prohibition to heal or speak, continued on until the end of his life. He recorded some last words and some community hours on tape until he died unexpectedly at 52 years of age on January the 26th, 1959. About this day, he had once said,
"It will be the most beautiful hour of my life, when I will be able to return home to my Father, to the glory of God."